Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our first WAM webinar of the year. So my name is Niamh Brennan, and I am a WAM project officer here at AHEAD. Just to let you know, I've had a little bit of technical difficulty beforehand, so apologies if my sound is a little bit off. If it is, hopefully one of my colleagues will pop in for me instead. Thank you guys so much for joining us today. I know we're still in lockdown, and I don't think this time last year we would have thought this. But thank you guys so much for those who've been here last year and who've kind of enjoyed our WAMinars. And anyone who's new, we really hope that you get something out of it. Just before we kick off, I just want to let you know about captioning. And there's a CC button down the end of your screen. If you click that, the captioning will pop up for you. I have my co-host Rachel with me today. You won't see her. She's going to be in the background to kind of the tech for me and answering any of your questions in the Q&A box. If you look at the Q&A feature down the bottom there, if you do have any questions specifically for our speakers, please do pop them in there. It's just easier for us to actually keep track of them. There is also a chat box, and that's for you guys to kind of chat with other attendees and also chat throughout the session, or you can just say hello and let us know where you're watching from today. It's always nice to kind of see where everyone is around the country. If you are on Twitter at all and you're going to be tweeting about the WAMinar, please use the hashtag. It's hashtag WAMinar, so it's WAMINAR. So I'd just like to start off the webinar today asking my colleague Rachel to launch our first poll of the morning. This poll is very much just kind of us getting kind of a sense of where you guys are from, what kind of background, and what kind of sector that you work in as well. So while that's happening, so for anyone who's engaged for the first time, AHEAD works to create inclusive environments in education and employment. So AHEAD's been around since 1988, and the WAM program, or just WAM for short, is a project of AHEAD, and it's been around since 2005. And the WAM program is funded by the Department of Employment Affairs and Social Protection. So WAM works with employers who provide paid graduate level internships or placements to graduates with disabilities by ring-fencing roles for a minimum of 6 months. We've placed over 470 graduates to date, and 80% of our graduates secure full-time work as a direct result of their placement upon completion. If you want to find any more information, and there's also lots of resources, just head over to our website. It's ahead.ie/WAM. So thanks so much for filling out that poll. I'm going to ask Rachel to stop it and to share the results. Great. So yeah, I think it's always really interesting for us just to kind of see where our audience are kind of coming from. So each course seems to be quite a big one in the public sector, the private sector, and also kind of education as well, which is great to see. Thanks so much for that. We can stop the results there. So when we were kind of deciding on putting this webinar together, we were kind of, we were thinking about temporary disability and what does temporary disability mean in the first place? A lot of time with disability, we kind of think it as a permanent condition or an illness that a person has for life, but that's not always the case. A person can become disabled temporarily for like a fixed period of time, or, because of an accident, an injury, or a medical diagnosis. The difference between temporary disability is that eventually you will get better. And sometimes that is with the support of medical intervention. So very often employees may sign off sick and then receive state benefits for the duration. And however, in this webinar, we want to inform and educate our employers about what they can do under the Employment Equality Act to support employees and carry out their duties with accommodation. So I'm delighted to say that we have 3 different speakers today. First up, we're going to have Dawn Bailey from Bank of Ireland. And she's going to be talking about her experience of receiving a cancer diagnosis and undergoing treatment while in the workplace. And then next up, we're going to have Kieran O'Sullivan. He's from the Limerick University, and he's going to share insights specifically around back injuries and how to support employees, particularly focused on remote working. And then to finish up, we're going to have Caroline McGrotty, which I'm sure most of you know, who is our WAM coordinator, and she's going to pop on and she's going to give you some practical tips around how to develop a process to ensuring employees with temporary disabilities can be supported in the workplace. So just to let you know about the format, I'm going to bring on each speaker individually. I'm going to let them speak for a bit, and then I'm going to pop on and then I'm going to do a Q&A with them. So we're not going to leave it till the end to do the Q&A. We're going to do it after each speaker. If you do have questions, please do pop it into the Q&A box, and I can ask the speakers after they speak, after their turn. So just want to remind you about the chat box as well. I can see loads of chats coming in, which is great to see. Please do let us know where you're kind of watching from. And also, if you have any experiences that you'd like to share, please do pop it into the chat box. It's always great to kind of have that sense of community. So I'd love to welcome my first speaker, which is Dawn. If Dawn, you'd like to turn on your camera and your mic, and I'm just going to go through your bio just to kind of give people a bit of a background. So Dawn is currently working in a strategic digital transformation role in Bank of Ireland, having joined the bank as head of seniors and vulnerable customers in 2017. Before joining Bank of Ireland, Dawn was Director of Sales and Marketing at Dublin Bus, overseeing significant digital transformation, including the development of the Dublin Bus app, the introduction of real-time passenger information, the introduction of smart ticketing and customer Wi-Fi in all buses. As the most senior woman in the company, she also took a lead role in supporting female progression. A mum of 2 young girls, Dawn was diagnosed with triple positive breast cancer in September 2018 and underwent chemo, surgery and radiation, including her full year of treatment in November 2019. So thank you so much for coming on today, Dawn. We really appreciate it. I think when we have kind of, events like this, it is important to have the practical tips, but also the personal story as well. So we really appreciate you coming on and sharing that.
No problem at all, and thanks for having me. I'm literally just going to tell you my story, and hopefully there'll be some nuggets in there for you guys. And I'll obviously happy to take any questions that you have, and just ignore as my email keeps pinging in the background there, and any noises from my wayward children and dogs in the background also. Okay,
it always happens. There's always something.
Yeah, no, I know.
Great.
Okay, I'll just get stuck in, I suppose. When on the family holiday back in 2018, when we could actually have holidays, I found a lump in my left breast. If I'm honest, I didn't think it was anything serious, because I'd had a previous scare back in 2015, which turned out to be hormonal changes, aka you're getting old, love. But the day I came back, I made an appointment with the GP, and within a week I was in the breast clinic in James's, where I had a mammogram, ultrasound, biopsy, all in one sitting. It's like a well-oiled machine. A week later I came back from the results stupidly on my own, and I remember sitting in the consultant's room when he told me I had cancer, and it wasn't until he said the word chemo that it actually registered. The rest is a bit of a blur, but he kept reiterating, you've caught it early, it's very treatable. And I thought I knew about breast cancer, but actually I hadn't a clue. I had triple positive, which is HER2 positive and hormone positive, and very aggressive, but also thankfully has multiple treatment options, and thankfully much more positive outcomes than say 20 years ago, before Herceptin was invented. The treatment plan for me was chemo first to shrink it, 8 weeks of AC, or as I like to call it, throw the kitchen sink at it chemo, then 12 weeks of Herceptin and Taxol, then surgery. I had a lumpectomy, well, I had 2 to get clear margins, a month of radium every day, and then another 13 3-weekly doses of Herceptin. At the time, people said to me, it'll take a year, and I was like, yeah, no, I'll be all done in 6 months. But I was diagnosed on the 5th of September, started chemo on the 28th, and that was 2018, and had my last treatment in November 2019. I suppose the key thing is everyone's journey with cancer is different, both physically and emotionally. And even in breast cancer, there's so many different types and treatment protocols. There's just not one size fits all. I remember I rang a friend who had been diagnosed a year before me, and she was trying to reassure me about chemo. She said, it's just like a bad hangover. And during that first phase of chemo, I had a virtual dartboard of her with her picture on it, which I would throw virtual darts at regularly, because this wasn't like any hangover I'd had previously. When I met my oncologist for the first time, I was adamant I was going to work through as much of my treatment as possible, for my own sanity as much as anything else. And I remember him giving me the head tilt, going, yeah, it's a very noble idea. And while I'm sure you'll work through some of your second phase, I can pretty much guarantee you won't work through the first one. And he wasn't kidding. There was about 3 days out of 14 where I felt like a human. But thankfully, the second phase was much easier. And I was able to agree with my line manager that I would work 2 to 3 days a week. I was really lucky that she was able to be that flexible, and my team were equally flexible. I mean, I met people, for walks on the canal near my house to have meetings, you know. But I remember meeting a colleague at a senior leadership day in the December, and he was asking me, what the hell are you doing in work? And I explained it wasn't out of any martyrdom to the bank, but just I needed to keep my head busy. He reckoned I was probably the first person ever to say they were coming to work in Bank of Ireland for the good of their mental health. By the Christmas, however, I was neutropenic, which means my white blood count was very low. So I had to be really careful. Christmas was spent handing out hand sanitizers, actually very similar to this Christmas. And I ended up mainly working from home until they came back up again. By the time I finished chemo, it was 5 months, the cumulative effect was starting to take its toll. So on advice from my surgeon and the company doctor, I stopped work to try and get ready for surgery. I ended up having 2 surgeries to get clear margins, and I had underestimated how much 2 general anesthetics kind of close together would take out of me. Then I had a little break, I think it was 3 or 4 weeks, and then I had a month of radium every day, which was a walk in the park at the time, actually, compared to chemo. But 2 weeks after I finished, again, that kind of cumulative effect, the fatigue kicked in. I finished radium in the middle of June, and on the 1st of July, I officially started back to work on a phased return. I was advised to work from home as much as possible. I suppose it's much easier now to do that because, well, at the time it wasn't necessarily the norm. I probably didn't do it as much as I needed to. When I was back full time for the first few weeks, I'd get to about 3 o'clock and it was like someone had just plugged me out. I used to describe it like I had X amount of credits for the week. And if I used them up all on Monday and Tuesday, that was me in bother. And that's fatigue. It's not fixed by a kind of a good night's sleep or a nap in the middle of the day. It's kind of tough. I have to say my colleagues, my team, my boss were all really supportive. While cancer itself isn't necessarily visible, the side effects of treatment are. I got away with shaving my head because it looked like a midlife crisis, but when your eyebrows and your eyelashes go, it's kind of hard to hide it. But I was also very conscious of coming back to work, that everyone loves a survivor. People ask how you're doing, and what they really want to hear, and it's human nature, is that you're fine, you're doing great, you've beat cancer and everything's back to normal. And sometimes it's not. And I think until people are honest enough to admit that they're not fine, and until the person asking is honest enough to know that when someone says they're fine, they might not be, you know, things won't necessarily open up for honest conversations. And speaking of honest conversations, so chemo thrust me headfirst into menopause at 44, one of the most unspoken women's health issues out there, which continues to affect my sleep, joint pain, brain fog, fatigue. And in reality, I guess I just had a very close call with a life-threatening illness that can come back at any time, and please God it won't, but it's an indiscriminate disease, which is why I continue to take hormone suppressants for at least another 5 years. I suppose when I was thinking about telling this story, I was thinking about the audience, and in terms of the key things for invisible disabilities, there's a couple of things, or temporary disabilities, sorry. So peripheral neuropathy is a common side effect from chemo, where you have kind of pain, numbness, and pins and needles in your hands and feet. It can affect your ability to grasp things, to fasten buttons. Fatigue, as I've mentioned, and brain fog are another big thing. Like literally, you know, everyone knows about walking into rooms and forgetting what you've walked in for. But this is on a whole other level. I find myself taking a huge amount of notes all the time. And then there's the mental health challenges. So a lot of people suffer from, I suppose, a form of post-traumatic stress. Some people are intensely private and want to be left alone to go through their journey. And in that instance, I guess sometimes maybe a nominated buddy might be useful in terms of keeping in touch with work. Clearly, I'm not intensely private. The HR machine tends to be kind of challenging, depending on what size the organization is, in terms of allowing you to work during treatment. You know, I think there's an assumption you're just going to stop work. And at the same time, though, like while where I work, we have a very generous sick pay scheme, I was still under pressure financially to return to work. And as soon as I could, in terms of, you know, paying the mortgage, And one of the things that surprised me was when I returned to work, I found I'd used up all my sick pay and didn't kind of qualify for any paid sick pay for another year. So that was just another thing that kind of, thankfully I was fine, but it was just another thing to be conscious of. Confidence levels are likely to be low, and the ability to take on new challenges. I was kind of back in work a full year before I moved from that kind of surviving mode to a point where I could actually kind of consider moving along with my career. I suppose in summary, the reality is you're never finished once you've been on a cancer journey. You know, I've at least another 3 years of hormone suppressants. I see my oncologist twice a year, annual mammograms, annual bone density scans to see if the hormone blockers are giving me osteoporosis. So it's always there. Mind you, even with all of that, I've been really lucky. I caught it early. The treatment protocols and everything were really effective. I've seen people on the chemo ward in James's going through a much more difficult time, and some who I didn't see again. So while no, it's not necessarily the right stage to do this from, I'd like to ask all the women in the audience to make sure you know your boobs, check yourselves regularly, and for the men in the audience, encourage your partners, your sisters, your mums to do the same. I caught it early, but we all know people who haven't been so lucky. Thanks a million.
Thanks so much, Dawn. That was really fantastic. It's hard to, you know, share such a personal story in a platform like this. I know it's a bit strange because we can't see anyone, so we know there are people there, but it is a strange format. But thank you so much for that. And that's actually the second time I've heard you speak. So I know myself and Caroline actually saw you speak in Bank of Ireland about a year and a half ago, I think. I think time is weird with COVID. But yeah, and it was just like, it was very real. And I think that's what I really took from it, is that you didn't hold back, which I thought was really great. And I just was looking at some of the comments there, and people were specifically said, thank you for mentioning menopause. And like, it is so important that we do actually talk about this. You know, I know that this, you know, it's not particularly a women's event, but it doesn't matter. I think in every event we should talk about these things because it does affect your everyday life. So thank you so much for that. There's loads of comments coming in saying thank you so much. And I think when somebody shares a personal story like that, people can connect and they kind of go, oh, thank God, because actually I felt it or a family member felt it. You know, I think the statistic is, you know, go ahead.
1 and 2. Yeah, I think everyone on the call will have had some experience with cancer. I think though, sometimes trying to frame it in terms of the employer and the colleague situation can be difficult to take it out of that personal space and into the workspace. Yeah. But and so I'm happy to share.
Brilliant, thank you so much. And one of the questions that I was actually wondering was around disclosure. How did you decide when to disclose and who to disclose to?
Ooh, yeah, sorry, again, I'm a very open person, probably to my detriment sometimes, but I had flagged to my line manager that I was going in to get results. I didn't tell her that when hadn't said I found a lump, because that was probably a bit of an overshare, but I had flagged just in case. And I remember actually at the time thinking, I've just worried people unnecessarily, you know. But I spoke to my line manager, and then once the diagnosis was confirmed, then I suppose the wheels started moving in terms of you know, what was going to happen next. I think I was unusual in that I wanted to stay working, but and again, like, that was just me. There's a lot of people just, you know, want to just focus on something else. You know, they don't want to be in the work, but for me it was a welcome distraction.
Yeah, no, thank you. I think that's really important to kind of say that, like, and I think we've definitely during the pandemic as well realized what it's like to sit at home and do nothing. That's really hard. So like, yes, the mental health aspect and the social aspect, and like going through treatment as well, like there's a whole other layer to that. So I can totally understand the whole, let's just work. I need to go to work because I need to do something.
Yeah, that was exactly it.
When it comes, I know when you kind of mentioned fatigue, and I was just wondering, how did you actually deal with fatigue and energy levels whilst you were in work?
Well, interestingly, with difficult, I actually just owned it. was very honest with my team. I at the time had a 2-hour commute each way,
Okay.
which was a nightmare. And actually, I have to say, the week before COVID hit, I had a chat with my then line manager and said, "Listen, I can't do 5 days a week in the office. I just can't." And then a week later, COVID hit, and we're all on lockdown. And I was like, "Woohoo! We could all work from home." So I just tried to manage it and be as upfront with it as I could. The screen time, like even now, all the Zoom and the calls, like it is exhausting. I mean, we know there's studies that show the cognitive overload of being kind of on full time on screens is hard. But if you layer in the other elements, it kind of it makes it harder. So there's times I just have to, you just step away from the screen, phone calls as opposed to Zoom calls. But fatigue in itself, you have to be honest and true to yourself, basically.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think it's important to recognize it, actually let a manager know or whoever know that actually, like, I can't do it today, and it is about that open conversation that they can't guess it.
Yeah, I could do it, but it'll be crap. Sorry, and fatigue. I think there is this thing, and there's a lot of autoimmune diseases and a lot of those areas that have fatigue as a side effect, and it's just, well, did you get a good night's sleep? It actually doesn't matter, because what your body is doing is it's focusing all its spare resources on trying to heal you or to keep the lights on, and you don't have any capacity for all the rest of the stuff.
There's a question here from Siobhan Hayes. Said, "Hi Dawn, thank you for sharing with us. What was the most helpful thing that your employer did or could do for you?"
I think it was flexibility, which I know can be hard within, as I said, the kind of machine around the rules and the time and the 26 weeks or the 12 weeks or whatever it is. They were they allowed me to be present as much as I was capable of being, and they had, I was able to be honest with them. I didn't have any concerns over, I wasn't in a position where I felt I had to hide anything, which was great. And actually lifted a real weight for me, because there's only so much you're trying to keep a brave face on for your own family, for my kids, for my husband, all that kind of stuff. I think the other thing, actually, now that I think about it in terms of family and supports, there's an awful lot of weight that my partner carried, and his employer was actually really, really good in terms of knowing that he was taking on the kind of dual parenting responsibilities when I was just not able. So there's kind of two sides to it. One is, when the individual is going through it, but also for family members who have taken on caring responsibilities.
Absolutely. I think it's really important to kind of recognize that it's not just you. It is actually your family as well, and even maybe your team, your colleagues as well, because they're probably worrying about you.
Totally.
So there is that kind of ripple effect.
Yeah, and people not knowing what to ask or what to say and how to support their colleagues. I always say, people say it takes a village to raise a child, but actually it also takes a village, and there is a village that kind of appears when you're going through a cancer journey. But so it is everybody, and there is a knock-on effect across the board.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you know what I mean? I think you find that with so many different things, especially disability related, is that kind of ripple effect of it. It does affect other people, and it's about having that conversation and kind of being honest about it. This is a question here from Claire Moran. Hi Dawn, did you find that you had to do things differently at work when you did return to work?
Yeah, I did. I had to, number one, be more open with my with my colleagues in terms of what my capacity was. I had to be realistic in terms of what I was capable of taking on in that kind of, especially for the first 6 months back, I had to also be realistic and kind of have a chat with myself about my expectations around my career and all that kind of stuff. I had to go, okay, right now, just get yourself back to zero, and then you can start to think about the rest of it. I think honesty was a big thing, both with myself and with my colleagues. Screen time, I had to try and reduce. Had to stop apologizing for printing things because I had really dry eyes, and I just couldn't cope with, and in a green environment that was kind of frowned upon. But yeah, I think those are the main things.
And is there any way in particular that your employer made you feel that you could be honest and you could let them know, about the fatigue and about even like mental health? Is there anything in particular that we could kind of share with employers that are here today to kind of go, well, actually, this is why I felt so comfortable?
Yeah, I mean, we have the employee assistance program. I think up to the point where I needed it, I kind of had always thought, no, it's for other people. But I was also very conscious of role modeling the kind of, and making sure I availed of the services that were available. So I had contacted them and had a number of counselling sessions. I think there's a lot of things that you can do, and I'm just going to mention that whole brain fog thing. I've actually lost the start of that question. Sorry.
Oh no,
demonstration.
You're
sorry.
No, you're absolutely fine. I was just asking, just kind of maybe practical examples for the employers that are watching today. Is there anything that made?
Yes, sorry.
No, you're fine.
Making sure that people feel comfortable accessing whatever supports are available. We've actually set up in the bank, we've recently set up a kind of a cancer support group, which allows people kind of confidentially to have a discussion around themselves, just to share, the shit stuff, and and their own kind of journeys, so that I suppose to provide that kind of additional layer of support. I think allowing an employee to manage their own journey, if that's feasible, so to try and make those decisions as to how much they want to work. And also I think to be super cognizant of not adding another layer of financial stress on top of what where possible, obviously not feasible everywhere, but where possible, on top of the other obvious kind of life stress stuff.
Absolutely. I think it's very interesting as well with the remote working now because of the pandemic. And as you were saying before, it wasn't the norm to work from home. People went into the office, you physically went in, but actually for a lot of people with disabilities, not just temporary disabilities, it actually would really suit to have that more flexible working.
Yeah.
So I think it's really important that employers do recognize that actually remote working does work. Also, it can become a reasonable accommodation as well, because it could be a temporary disability, or I think it is so important to kind of recognize that.
I think before lockdown, there was this kind of notion, and again, it's just in the everyday narrative that you're working from home. And I think within 6 weeks of all of us having dispersed to our homes and seeing the productivity levels, everyone's like, oh, actually, yeah, no, it's fine. It's fine. We can do this. We can trust people.
Yep. Absolutely. I think one of the things was trust, that maybe after everyone would be home watching Netflix. It was like, well, actually, no, people are working. People want to work.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Absolutely. Great. I think we're going to finish up there. Is there anything else that you would like to say or add?
No, I think that's it. Thanks a million for having me on, and I hope that it's been helpful. And just if anyone wants to ask me any questions personally, whatever, please feel free to share my email address, or or if anyone has got anyone going through a journey and wants to talk to someone, I'm more than happy to get involved or to talk to them.
Thank you so much, Sean. We really, really
No
appreciate
problem.
that. Definitely pop into the
Thanks.
chat box and have a look at all the comments, because there's lovely comments there for you. Thank you so much. You
Thanks.
can turn off your camera there. Thank you so much. That was really fantastic. I just think it's so important to hear that personal story, and to hear that it's a bit crap as well, because it's not just, as Dawn was kind of saying, that inspirational kind of survivor. Actually, it's tough and it's hard. I think that's important to hear. So we really appreciate Dawn coming on. Thank you so much. So our next speaker, we have Kieran O'Sullivan. I'm going to get Kieran to turn on his camera and his microphone. Hey Kieran, how are you doing today?
Hi Niamh, hope you can hear me and see me okay.
I can indeed, perfect. I'm going to run through your bio just really quickly, just to kind of give people a bit of background. So Kieran O'Sullivan is a senior lecturer in physiotherapy at the University of Limerick. His research interest is musculoskeletal pain and injury, particularly persistent spinal pain. So he's completed his PhD on persistent lower back pain. And he's published over 140 journal articles and has obtained over €4 million in research funding. His research group disseminates its research through the website pained.com, which is an online platform providing advice and information from both patients and clinical researchers on managing musculoskeletal pain. So thank you so much for coming on, Kieran. We really appreciate it. I think when we were kind of talking about temporary disability, cancer was something, because of the statistics, 1 in 2 people in this country, but also, we were kind of, well, what other kind of temporary disabilities that, our employers would kind of really benefit from. And I think because so many of us are working from home now, we're in a chair so much more often. We're not getting up and actually walking around, that we were like, actually, I think back pain would be something. And once we kind of started talking about it amongst the team, we were like, yeah, actually, I think that's something that's really important. So I know you're going to give a small kind of little slideshow on kind of some insights specifically around back pain, and then we're going to do a Q&A afterwards. So I will let you, if you want to just pop onto the full screen. Yeah.
Just trying to get that to behave. Sorry, no. Resume.
No, you're absolutely fine.
Sorry, no, 1 sec. I'm going to stop sharing that for a second.
Yeah, no, you're grand.
It's not liking it.
Technology is always the worst. When we first came on, my sound was being a bit funny.
Yeah, it's not loving that. Give me one more attempt.
Yeah, no, absolutely. If you want, we actually have the presentation as well, so we could share from our end if that suits.
Yeah, I'll have one more attempt and then I'll abandon all hope.
No problem.
I don't think it's going to allow me share other than in that view there. That'll be okay. Is that coming through okay?
If you're happy enough with that, go first. I'm going to turn off my camera and I'll pop back on when you're done.
No worries. So thanks to Niamh and Caroline for having me here today, and thanks to Dawn for sharing her insights. I'm going to talk a little bit around my experience of back pain, and I suppose particularly with the lens of around what happens for from the employer perspective in terms of trying to help people back to work or manage people who are currently sore while at work. A little bit about myself. I'm a physiotherapist. I did a PhD, as Niamh mentioned, on people with back pain, specifically looking at sitting and back pain. And personally, I used to have a lot of back pain. It had, a reasonably big impact on my life in terms of my ability to be playing sport, to be able to work, and so on. And so I come at this from the point of view of the clinician, the researcher, but also the person whose time was taken up with a lot of back pain at one point in my life. What we can say is that this is a graph showing how likely people are to be off with specific conditions. So this graph on the scale on the left is the likelihood of, if you have a condition, being disabled by it. So if we go back over time, circulatory conditions like cardiovascular disease such as diabetes, hypertension, and so on, they used to be a pretty big cause of disability, but thankfully over the years we've got better at handling them. So you've now, even if you've got hypertension now, you're much more likely to be able to work and have a meaningful life. In contrast, musculoskeletal conditions, back pain being the big one, you are more likely, if you have them now, to be disabled and off work. That's not a good sign, and it's not a sign that people like me have helped people do better. So we got to think, what have we been doing that, in contrast to, say, cardiovascular disease, what have we been doing that isn't helping? And if you were in charge of the health budget, would you look at that and give people like us more money? Now, when we look at this graph, this is showing what's been happening to healthcare options for things like back pain. Top left, we've way more MRI scans. Top right, way more morphine prescriptions. Bottom left, way more injections. And bottom right, the big one, lots more expensive invasive surgeries. In other words, it's not from not offering treatment that people aren't getting better with back pain. We're actually providing way more treatment for back pain now than we did in the past. And it isn't really helping. A big part of that is probably realize at this stage how back pain is viewed. If I walked onto, not that you can ask people on O'Connell Street that much these days, but if I was to do a survey on O'Connell Street today in Limerick, and I asked them, what do you think causes back pain, or what do you think we need to do to prevent it? People generally would emphasize two groups of factors: physical factors and pathological factors. So physical factors, like they would say things like the way we sit and how we bend, and pathological factors, like they would talk about the stuff we can see on scans, like discs and so on. And while they play a little role, it's probably not anywhere near as big as people think. And that's a problem because, in contrast, if we ask the same people on O'Connell Street what causes lung cancer, they're pretty accurate. They understand things like smoking are a big risk factor. Or if we ask them, how do you prevent getting diabetes or stroke, people are pretty accurate. So there's a big issue in terms of the way the public, and that also reflects employers and employees, the way they view pain is still a little bit outdated. So to give a very typical story, this is a story about Karen, and I'll let you read this about what she told me when she got back pain. And that's absolutely true. But what I'll show on the next slide is that's not the full story. Because sometimes when you go to see a doctor or a physio or orthopedic surgeon, that's all we hear. But sometimes we leave out or even don't ask about some important things. So this is Karen's full story, where we see that yes, she hurt her back lifting a box, and her job involves lifting and bending, but there was a lot of other stuff going on in her life that is also very important in terms of developing pain and in terms of persisting pain, or pain that doesn't get better and doesn't recover. Sometimes patients, when they bring this stuff up with us, they'll often say, oh, I could get into that, but that's not that relevant, or it's going off topic. And actually, when patients say that to us, it's really a good indicator that that's really important. Whereas we'll see a lot of workers where they'll be very worried about the angle of their chair, the way they stand or bend at work, and that is relevant, but actually how well you get on with your co-workers, the security of your job, your working terms and conditions, and how much you can switch off, reduce your stress, sleep well, they're all equally important. So this comes back to the idea of when we talk about back pain. A lot of people will still use the term back injury, but that's not really accurate very often. So I would contrast it with when we think about footballers getting a hamstring injury. That's usually the right term because it's a sudden injury that looks different to a hamstring that isn't injured. And that's possibly true sometimes with back pain, but actually not always. And in contrast to other parts of the body, we're quite happy that the term headache is acceptable, but backache isn't considered acceptable. In fact, it seems a little bit unscientific. And there's sometimes, I suppose, a risk that if I start talking about how back pain can be very significant, very serious, very much affected by mental health and your overall life, that it can sound like we're saying the pain is psychosomatic or in some way related to either not wanting to get better or just feeling sorry for yourself. And that's not the case at all. There's that physical and mental health are very closely connected in many ways. But unfortunately, most treatments out there, and this applies to most professions, physio, chiro, GP, surgery, it's very much based on the idea that if you have back pain, it's because your tissues like discs, bones are injured or damaged. And if we look at back pain in the workplace, so I want you to think about, well, what would your employer or a company currently be doing to prevent back pain? I would say they would be probably looking at doing manual handling training. And we've done a series of studies showing that essentially back pain, like manual handling training, first of all, isn't effective. People spend a lot of money on it. It doesn't reduce the risk of people getting back pain. It doesn't necessarily improve the likelihood of people getting back to work. What it does tend to do, as we've seen in a couple of studies, is it makes people petrified about bending. So if we look at any other kind of condition, if we were looking at running problems or hamstring injuries or bone density issues like osteoporosis, what we would do is to try and reduce your risk of injury, we would gradually practice the thing you need to do to get good at it and to strengthen your body. Whereas a lot of the manual handling and ergonomic advice is based on, well, if you're going to have to do something, avoid it at all costs. And that doesn't make you strong enough to do it, but it can also make you hyper vigilant or too concerned about the dangers of things. And it's not just the manual handling, there's the whole area of how you sit at a desk and what we consider to be good or bad postures. So we've done a series of studies amongst physios and members of the public, people with and without pain in different countries. And you won't be surprised to hear, I guess, that if you look at posture number 1, that nobody thinks that's a good way to sit, but that postures like number 2 and number 9 and number 5, where the person is more upright, are thought to be better postures. But importantly, they're not. It looks like you're no more or less likely to get back pain, no matter what way you sit. And we've probably spent too much time beating people up about the way they sit or the curve of their spine, when that's basically related to body shape and genetics and so on. So again, if we look at where we're putting the emphasis in workplaces, a lot of it is on the physical stuff, which can have a little role. I'm not saying it has no role, it's just that that's where we're spending all our time looking. Whereas when we look at the real risk factors for persistent pain, yes, there's pathoanatomical stuff, like sure, how your bones and discs look, that plays a little role, but it's little. And physical factors like being strong enough, for sure, that's important, and being flexible enough, and being able to move with confidence, that's fine. They have a role, but there's a great, I suppose, underappreciation of what we'll call lifestyle and psychosocial factors. So your stress levels, your sleep levels, your overall fitness and activity, your mental health, your work-life balance. And these are hard. I'm not trying to say they're easy, but they are probably where we need to spend more time. And just to reassure people, again, this isn't just around chronic pain. I'll often give examples to patients and members of the public that it's not just that pain is weird. This is common in everyday life. I make little jokes sometimes about how when I get health conditions like cold sores, which I get intermittently, it's caused by a range of different things, including, like we'll say, for example, one of the times I got cold sores was when one of the kids was very small and not sleeping well. And that's okay, because there's an understanding that you can get cold sores when you're a bit run down, for lack of a better word. But the thing is, we get back pain when we're a bit run down as well. And just because you get a cold sore when you're run down, it doesn't mean it's psychosomatic, because there's two things. It's a real cold sore, but it's driven by, yes, a virus, a biological virus, but also things like, well, if you were stressed or not sleeping or not eating well or not getting enough exercise. So again, lots of health conditions, back pain being one of them, is around what we might call biological physical things, but also this other stuff that goes on in life. So when we talk about managing back pain, we talk about 3 main non-pharmacological aspects to care. Educating people about pain, and that's this kind of stuff. Then we'll say it's around people can become run down, and it's not just about damaging tissues. Almost always encouraging exercise, but not worrying about one type of exercise, thinking about things like preference, cost, and access. So do you like it? Can you afford it? Is it available near to you? And that's really important in terms of workplaces. So rather than telling people to do an exercise program that's 20 miles away from them, that's expensive and that they can only go to at an inconvenient time, finding something that'll work. And then the last part, which is really important, lifestyle change. And again, this is very hard, and the social aspects are key, but things like sleep, stress, diet, and so on. Now, there's nothing really complicated in any of that. Educating people on what people means, or what pain means, exercise, living a healthy lifestyle. It sounds really basic, but it's hard, and it's not what we're currently doing. To finish up, the simple injury model of pain is outdated. It does explain some pain, but it rarely explains the important pains. Current prevention strategies for back pain do not work. All the evidence says that, and they might even be a waste of time and money. And if we look at people who have back pain where they really are struggling for a long time, it's very rarely that that's the case in healthy people who are sleeping well, have good stress levels, and are physically active, happy people who are feeling good in terms of their mental health and their social circumstances. And it's very rare in people who feel valued by the employer. So there's some of the things we should be focusing on. And if we think about back pain, which is what I'm here talking about, if we work on these factors, the good news is they also help things like depression, obesity, fatigue, and obviously then the economy and employment. If anybody wants any other information, we have a website, pained.com, which Niamh mentioned. But more importantly, I'm happy to take any questions you have now. Thanks for your time.
Karen, that's so interesting. I've taken loads of notes there. It is really interesting to actually look at it as a more holistic approach rather than just kind of saying, okay, well, what chair are you in, or how are you sitting? But it is kind of idea, and that idea that it's your health and it's your lifestyle, and it is that more looking at an overall picture rather than just looking at the kind of simple things that maybe aren't working at the minute.
Yeah.
I think there's a couple of questions that have come in here.
I see it just popping up on the chat.
Yeah.
Ergonomic assessments, somebody asking about?
Yeah, so Shona have asked are ergonomic assessments essentials to reduce lower back pain?
So great question. So two parts to that. Essentially, has anyone ever shown that they reduce the impact of back pain? No. So I would say the short answer is no, but with an important proviso. As an employer, you are probably required to do something to try and reduce your risk of employees getting back pain. And currently, that's all employers feel that they're kind of capable of doing, because it's a nice, simple, measurable thing to do. And then if you do an ergonomic assessment, then an employee can't say you did nothing for me. But it just looks like it's an ineffective, bothersome waste of time and money. So, for example, if I was an employer and hiring people, I wouldn't even dream of doing those kind of things. All the evidence says it's not effective. It's just that we'll say the things I'm suggesting are actually quite tricky. So it's not as if we can say that these are easy things to change. But if you were going to, I would be interested if employers looked and did an economic analysis of how much time and money are we spending on watching the way people are laying out their keyboards and computers and manual handling training, and then think about, well, if we didn't spend any more, but we just spent that amount, what could we spend it on better? And it looks like in a couple of studies, there's a few things you can do to improve that.
Very good, thank you for that. There's another question here. What is the best reasonable accommodation for managing lower back pain?
Okay, and I guess I'll presume that's coming from the point of view of the employer. So, for example, one of the challenges there is that oftentimes the challenge is you've got what the government and the kind of the public sick policy, sick leave system will fund, and what the healthcare system will be. The biggest thing, I suppose, that you can probably try and do is to not penalize people for coming back to work. So, for example, then we can talk about, well, which specific things. I would be very reluctant to kind of make an invalid, in the old sense of thing of telling people what you can't do. So as much as possible, try and take the person, we won't force you, but we will say, what can you do? So the idea of looking again at what the person is capable of doing rather than saying you can't do this and you can't do that. And that comes from physios and doctors as much as anything else. So in terms of reasonable accommodations, a big part of the evidence suggests the big thing is having good relations or tolerable relations between the employer and the employee. And so if they feel I've got a chance of communicating with them, we have a chance of finding a reasonable accommodation. But as soon as the employee feels I'm being forced or pushed by the employer or society, it sets up a whole series of resistance. So there's an old rheumatologist, or I shouldn't say old, an experienced rheumatologist, Norton Hadler, and he has a famous line about how if you have to prove you are sick, you can't get better. And so if we set up a system as employers where we're saying, if you don't prove your back is very bad, and you won't get your sick pay, then we can't be surprised if that kind of adds fuel to the fire. So that's a long-winded answer. But the big thing would be to try and keep the relationships between the employer and employee okay, because the costs in the short term of helping somebody get back to work are nothing relative to the costs of workplace litigation and all the long-term absenteeism and so on.
No, thank you for that. I think it's really interesting because I know what Dawn was saying as well about having that honest conversation with your employer and making sure that the employee feels comfortable enough to actually disclose or be able to have those conversations. So actually, I think you're both saying very similar things. It's very much, the employer having that kind of honest conversation, but allowing it to be open as well, that people can come to you and kind of say, okay, actually, I am struggling here. And it's maybe, and because of it, it's leading to back pain. So it's allowing those conversations to happen.
So we published a paper just last year on rowers, high-level elite rowers in Ireland and Australia. So in one sense, different to employees and all the rest of it. But the title of the paper was "We're the Best Liars in the World," because the story within that was how there was these young, up-and-coming rowers. They get a lot of back pain. But if they started telling the coach that they were getting back pain, they were at risk of not getting their contract renewed, not getting promoted to the senior team. So again, it's like that point you mentioned, Ian, that there's trust and communication, and that it's safe to disclose, look, this would be good if I could explore a few things here and there. It's just that, again, a lot of the time, the challenges, the really important thing to look at is, how am I getting on with my coworkers, my manager, my sense of being overburdened with work, as opposed to the angle that my mouse is at. Saw a question popping up there then in the Q&A around standing from Claire. Do you think that standing for short periods you can reduce low back pain? So I'll split that into two as well. On the one hand, overall, no. So we'll say if we look at 1,000 people who are standing for big chunks of time versus 1,000 people sitting, it looks like they'll both get some back pain, not a big difference. However, there are individual variations. And so for every patient who I'll see who says, I feel great sitting, but as soon as I'm standing in a queue or walking around town, I get sore, I'll have somebody that says the exact opposite because of a different body shape or different conditions, where they'll say, I could stand all day, but I can't sit. So in terms of that earlier point about reasoned accommodations, I don't think we should be forcing, if at all possible, people to use a sitting desk or a chair or a standing position or flexible ones. But if we can allow flexibility and let people try different ones, I think it's reasonable to allow people to have, if they need to, try and be flexible about the position they are in. But there is no one right posture for people. So again, it can cause friction where, an employee feels, if I only had a standing desk, I'd be fine. It's rarely that simple. But as an employer, it might be foolish to not try and meet the person halfway, to try and make a reasonable accommodation. It's just that there is a point at which you're spending money and it mightn't be making a difference.
Well, thank you for that. Is there any other questions then for Kieran before we finish up? I think that was really informative. It was kind of, I have to say, it got me thinking a lot about it and about kind of lifestyle and, relationships, that it all kind of feeds into each other.
It is, because I suppose one of the things that comes up at the moment, just to finish up, is I'm talking to you at the moment on a kind of a chair I wouldn't normally be sitting on, and poked away in a room with a different desk. And, there are lots of people getting back pain at the moment, and they are working at home. It's just that I think if I look at my own situation, the chair and the desk is different, but as long as I have a little bit of time away and I'm not trying to do the homeschooling with the kids at the same time, the level of tension in my back and my stress levels are smaller. In other words, the desk is different, the chair is different, but it's the chaos of life that's the real trigger at the moment. Am I worried about my parents? Is my job secure? Am I trying to do 3 things at the same time? Can I ever get away from the email and the phones? And I think that applies to a lot of us. It's just that sometimes the simple answer is the easiest thing to try and focus on, but it isn't necessarily giving us the biggest bang for our buck.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it is sometimes kind of, just buy that chair or just buy that thing and it fixes the problem, but actually there is so much more to it. Thank you so much for that. And before we finish up, is there anything else that you would like to add or say to any of the employers that are here today?
No, not at all. Other than to say, if anybody did have any particular questions, obviously they can email me. My email address is kieran.o'sullivan@ul.ie, and there's that website which has more that's more information for patients. And if you have people who have back pain, you can always feel free to send them to that. But by all means, email. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to clarify what we've specifically done around manual handling training, ergonomic assessments, because again, I am conscious, I think it's essentially a waste of time, but you do have a minimum legal requirement you need to meet for your employees to make sure that it's a safe environment. But we've looked at changing what is those requirements so that we meet any legal requirements without scaring people.
Absolutely. No, I think it's really fascinating. And that's great. What I'll do is I'll pop Dawn and your email into the chat so people can get in contact if they need to.
Okay. Have a nice day, everybody.
Thanks so much, Kieran.
Bye.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Thank you so much to our first 2 speakers. We really appreciate it. I think they were, obviously quite different, but I think it's important to kind of look at kind of different aspects of temporary disabilities. So now I'm going to bring on Caroline Grotti, who is the WAM program coordinator. I'm sure you all know Caroline very well. Welcome, Caroline.
Back again. People are kind of sick of seeing my face at this stage, I think, maybe.
I know we need to bring you back on. Brilliant. So Caroline is going to go through kind of top 10 tips and kind of takeaways for employers. So I'm going to turn off my camera and I will pop back on when Caroline is done.
Brilliant. You can see that, Niamh, nothing's getting in the way there.
I can see it perfectly.
Yeah, brilliant. So happy 2021, everybody. I think it's been 2 months since our last WAMinar, so really excited to kind of kick off the year with more WAMinars. So Dawn and Kieran were both sharing their expertise in what they were talking about, and I suppose just wanted to finish up today's session, just really kind of so everyone can take away top 10 tips based on kind of what you've heard from Dawn, but also from Kieran as well, and just from our own knowledge here in the WAM program. So you will be getting these PowerPoint afterwards, so you will be getting an email with the PowerPoint pack, so you don't have to be scribbling down or anything like that. So I suppose tip number one, and this has come up actually in the last two speakers, is, you know, it is so important to create an atmosphere in your organization that encourages disclosure. It doesn't matter if it's a temporary disability or if it's a permanent disability. Your organization really does need to promote disclosure as a whole. So some of the things, we actually had a recent WAMinar last November around disclosure and how you could do that, but it's definitely signposting it. So, you know, if there's, you know, monthly emails going out from HR, you know, really signposting where people can go if they need to disclose for a bit of support in the workplace because of either a temporary disability or a permanent one that they've acquired while working. The second one is, if someone does have a temporary disability, and I know we kind of focus on cancer and back pain today, but, you know, temporary disabilities is a whole load of different things. You could have someone who's fallen down the stairs and broken their leg, and their leg could be in a cast for 6 weeks. And I suppose the first thing to do is, oh, sure, we'll sign them off sick for 6 weeks until they get better. But, you know, because that's what the employee handbook says, you know, if a person's sick and they're going to get better, they're signed off and paid sick pay. So I suppose just look at your employee handbook. You know, you might have read it. People tend to only read the employee handbook when they need to know something. Okay, so if you're a line manager and your employee comes to you and says that they have broken their leg or they've just received a cancer diagnosis, go back to the employee handbook. You know, I'm sure there's probably protocols into who you should be informing, but also to their entitlements and what you should be doing. So again, for HR as well, it might be an opportunity for you guys to actually look at your employee handbook and see, are we just assuming that everyone's going to be on sick leave, or can we actually put in a new policy in place where we look at maybe providing support and reasonable accommodation to employees who want to continue working during their temporary disability? So just kind of consult the employee handbook. After this webinar, you're probably all going to go to your organizations and look at the sick leave policy and see what it says. But yeah, it is important to kind of just refer back to that, because that is the protocols that happen within your organization, and every organization is different. Sometimes in the employee handbook as well, it actually mentions specific supports that you could get, or that you have to refer them on to occupational health for a review, because you might need to get your own internal assessment done. So yeah, just kind of, Dawn mentioned earlier on, she's actually kind of set up a support group for people going through cancer, and it's a peer support group. So that kind of stuff may not be in the handbook. I don't know if it is, but it's really, you know, see what else is happening in your organization. Most organizations, particularly large ones, have the employee assistance program where they offer counseling sessions if someone has received a diagnosis of cancer that they may need mental health support. So yeah, just kind of, again, look at that employee handbook, talk to HR, see what supports are out there for employees who may be going through this time. Number 4, I suppose, if you're a line manager or HR, it is important that you get information from that employee regarding their diagnosis and their recovery plan. You know, so I kind of refer to the cancer, you know, the recovery plan could be for a number of years, you know, so it's important that you kind of get an idea of the type of diagnosis. Now, you're not going to be expert, but that you have some indication of their recovery plan and when they may be back to full-time work again. But also remember to really respect the employee's privacy and trust as well, you know, that you're not just going there with a checklist going, tell me about this, without actually kind of, you know, listening and being there. And also, you know, if they don't want to disclose to the rest of their team, you have to respect that as well. But it is important for line managers and HR to know, so that they can implement, you know, certain procedures such as sick pay or reasonable accommodation. but ultimately you do have to respect that employee's trust and privacy as to who they want to tell. They may not want to tell anyone in the early stages of receiving that diagnosis, but perhaps as time goes on, they may want to. Everybody is different in what they're willing to share. Number 6 then, seek advice from external organisations if necessary. I did see there was something in the chat there around, who do we go to for support when that person has to come back to for full time. So there are organisations out there. So for example, like Kieran, he has his own company. So, if an employee is out with sciatica, for example, and they've had a major operation, perhaps consult an organisation like his one. I know that the Irish Cancer Society, they have a lot of resources on their website around, kind of for employers in that return to work as well. So I suppose kind of, don't be afraid to seek advice from external organisations, because that's what they do. That's what their job is. Number 7, the most important thing that we always do in the WAM programme is to do a needs assessment. So I've mentioned earlier on, it's very easy to write someone off sick for a period of 8 weeks, okay? But really think about the job that they're doing and the impact of their disability. So I'll use an example of someone falling down the stairs and breaking their leg. They may be in a cast for, 6 to 8 weeks. If that person's job is that they're in a supermarket and they're on the shop floor stacking shelves, yes, they're probably not going to be able to do that for the period of 6 to 8 weeks. But if you're in an office type of environment where, the person's actually had an administration job where they're sitting at a desk, does that really mean that they need to be signed off for 6 to 8 weeks? Could they do remote working? And most of us are now remote working. So I definitely think it's really time to really reflect on, just because someone has broken their leg, does that mean they need to go out? Maybe not. It depends on the job. So the needs assessment is always looking at the impact of the job that they're in versus the impact of the disability, be it temporary or permanent, it doesn't matter. It's always trying to combine those two things together and seeing what supports can be put in place as a result of this needs assessment. It's important as well that if you are doing a needs assessment, that there's regular review periods. So because your needs might change. So initially your needs might be higher because you might be going through a lot of chemo, you might need a lot of time off for medical appointments, your fatigue levels may be, really high. But once you've come out of that and maybe your recovery plan is changing, you may be in a better position to kind of, undertake more work. So it is important to carry out regular reviews of that assessment because of your changing needs and support. Number 9 is consider the Employee Retention Grant. So this is a grant actually available from the Department of Social Protection. It's called the Employee Retention Grant. I have a link in the PowerPoint slide, but if you Google it, it'll come up as well. This grant, not a lot of people know about it. It's only available to private employers. So what this grant is, it provides funding to identify accommodations or training or both to enable the employee to stay in their current position. It also provides funding to retrain that employee so that they can remain within the organisation. So there's 2 different types of funding. So there's strand 1, which is called the Development of Retention Strategy. So this is actually where you might consult with an expert, such as an occupational therapist or whatever it may be. You may pay someone to do an assessment on that particular person before they go back to the workplace. You can get up to €2,500 available through the government for that, or 90% of the cost. So for example, if it's €2,000 turned out to be the cost, you get 90% of that. The second part is once you kind of, develop that retention strategy, so you've consulted with an expert, you then can apply for a second, I suppose, strand 2 of the funding, which is the implementation of that strategy. So you can get up to €12,500 for that one, or 90% of the cost. So things that might be included there is you may need to assign a job coach to retrain that person to move to a different department, for example. You may need to maybe purchase some equipment or maybe look at how the building is or something like that. So all these things can be actually applied and you might get funding for. So this grant is available to the Department of Social Protection. It's probably a well-kept secret. So we're very much in favour of kind of, you know, making sure employers know that these grants exist as well. And then I suppose just the last top 10 tip, number 10, is, you know, offer support. And I think that was really a theme that was coming through today, is that, you know, listen and be supportive, and not always just see them as a condition or a label, or, you know, rule them out from the very off. You know, offer support to the employee, you know, because while they may have a temporary disability, they could have long-lasting impacts of that going on. So for example, you know, their mental health, depression may come up as a result of them receiving that temporary disability. So, you know, it's very important for everybody, for managers, employees, colleagues, HR, to offer support to that employee as best as they can. So, Niamh, that was all my top 10 tips. Short and sweet.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Caroline. I think it's always really nice after like a webinar like this, where we hear personal stories and we hear expert opinions. There's actually 10 takeaways of things we can actually take away from it. So yeah, I hope you guys found that really helpful. I definitely learned so much from it. So thank you so much. I want to say a massive thank you to Dawn and to Kieran and to Caroline for, you know, coming on and sharing that with us. I think it is really important. There's no other questions at the minute. So what I might do is we might just finish up, because I know kind of people, it's nearly lunchtime, so I'm sure people want to kind of pop off. But no, I just want to say thank you again for everyone for coming. You will be sent a SurveyMonkey link once you click out of this meeting, and I think my colleague Rachel will be able to put it into the chat as well. It'll take 2 minutes just to fill it out. For us, it's really helpful just to kind of get a bit of feedback from the WAMinars itself, so that we can change it. We can also come up with new ideas as well. So please do that. That feedback is always really helpful to us. We will be sending on PowerPoints, so I'll send them off after lunch today, so you can get them. And please do keep an eye on our website as well. So our next webinar is going to be on the 3rd of March, and it's going to be specifically looking at autism. So if you're on our mailing list, you're going to get the email, but also we'll have it up on our social media and our website as well. I know there's loads of comments coming in there saying thank you to everyone, and we really appreciate speakers. Thank you everyone for coming along. If you are tweeting, please do tweet. It's hashtag WAMINAR. And yeah, thank you guys so much for coming along. I will let you all go. Thank you very much.